are listening to the Balancing Act podcast. Here's your hosts, Jamie Wonko and Joe Vitale.
Hello and welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I am one of your two hosts. This is Joe Vitale, and I am sitting here with the sun-kissed Jamie Wonko. I think that's going to be our your lighting is just so on point. I'm down here in a new recording space to make sure that my family is able to actually use the rest of my home.
I'm so glad because often, hello everybody. Often you think that you're that we can't see you making faces at them, and being like.
Yes, I need like one of those like big recording buttons. So we have a guest today that is going to help us talk about a very important topic, one that is oh goodness, probably the elephant in the room in education for sure. And we're just going to bring him in. So let's bring in Mr. Jonathan Mast. Hello, sir. How are you? Thank you very much for joining us today on the Balancing Act podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation. I love AI, and I'm really excited to talk about it in education.
Yes, Jonathan. I've been following Jamie and I both been following you for a while now. And all of your content's been popping up about how you talk about leveraging AI. And a lot of the content that you talk about is in the advertising space, marketing, that kind of stuff. Correct.
That's my background.
Yeah, and I know we had a very candid conversation about what this is like in education because we all grew up with AI. We all remember Clippy, right?
Oh yeah,
you remember Clippy on the Word documents? It looks like you're writing a business letter. Would you like help with that? I mean, that was we grew up with AI. Clippy. Who doesn't love Clippy?
My goodness,
I had that joke in my head for a while. So
that's good.
Yeah, part one of our conversation today with you is going to be about teachers and AI and how to leverage it in the classroom. It is, again, it's the elephant in the room topic. It is it's talked about in our faculty meetings. It's talked about in the faculty rooms. It's online. It's every platform, Canva, all these different platforms and slide extensions you can put onto Google Slides that are going to do the work for you and be more efficient. So this is going to be an ongoing, I think, topic with us in our season 2. But we definitely love to hear. First of all, a little bit about, and I'm kind of jumping ahead here. First of all, a little bit about your background and how Jonathan Mast came to be a voice for and a proponent for AI for efficiency.
Well, my background, as I mentioned, is in digital marketing. I've spent that time there since really 1995 when I sold my first website. And we'll fast forward through a lot of years into 2023. I've been using AI much like everybody else through Clippy and GPS and you name it, Grammarly to make sure that I was punctuating things right because English was never my forte. It's the only language I can speak, but writing it in grammar was never my thing. So Grammarly came to the rescue. And then, in 2023 or 2022, I'm sorry, they came out with this amazing graphical interface or easy user interface for us to use ChatGPT. And I started playing around with it. And being someone who is ADD, I got diagnosed when I was 43. It really very quickly became obvious to me that this was an amazing tool to help me amplify my skill and experience. And I just decided I'd missed, the PC craze. I'd missed the internet wave. I was working during both of those, but I'd missed them both. I wasn't going to miss the AI. And so I just jumped in both feet first or dove in head first, however you want to say it, and decided to learn how to use AI, but do it from a practical perspective. Everybody likes to talk theoretical and what if and all that. And being ADD, I guess that's not me. I want to talk about how can I use it today, maybe like in the next 10 minutes. And so I really began focusing on practical. How do we make it easy to use and accessible to everybody? Because I believe it is truly an amazing tool that can help virtually everyone on the planet.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, and you said 2022 was when they first came out with the first version.
Yeah, I think it was November of 2022 when they came out with the first version of the ChatGPT existed prior to that, but didn't have the great interface and everything else. You had to be a programmer. I'm not a programmer. I'm a marketing guy.
Okay. What are some of the things that you suggest to people as they're just getting started with using any AI or, ChatGPT or Gemini? If you want to talk to, for those of us who might not be clear on what the difference between those two things are or the similarities
Sure.
between the two, that would be something definitely we'd love to hear about.
Well, I recommend first to keep it simple and don't fall victim to the bright, shiny object syndrome. And again, that's probably because that impacts me and a lot of my audience. I work with a lot of business owners who are, like me, ooh, wow, it's that squirrel. I lost my attention and I went somewhere else. And that's so easy in AI because literally every day there's new tools coming out. There's new ways to do things. Keep it really simple. I recommend everybody start with ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini, one of those three. Those are the three big players. If you have access to one of them, you don't need the other two. They're very, very good at what they do. There are some other tools that I use, but those are really the basics. And when you're getting started, I think that the worst thing you can do is try to find something that does everything for you. Instead, get one of those tools. They all have free versions you can play with. Decide if you like it. Does it work for you? And just identify something in your day that you'd like to save time on. One of the first things I used it for was to help me write email. I've got emails I need to respond to. Oftentimes I'd have to sit and spend 5 or 10 minutes thinking about how do I best reply to this. Instead, I fed the email that maybe you sent me into ChatGPT and asked it to respond, and it did. And then I just edited that. That was far faster than me trying to craft everything from scratch. So that's my base recommendation is just get started doing something simple and don't overcomplicate it. It's not anything to be scared of.
So all three that you mentioned are have free versions and then also versions that you can pay for.
Paid versions as well, correct?
Yes. Do you pay for all three of them? Do you have one that
I do.
Yeah. Do you have one that you go to more often, or are you equal parts for all of them?
That's a great question. It really probably depends on the day you ask me. Right now, based on the models and everything else, I'm a huge proponent of Claude. I think it's the best for writing, and most of what I do use it for is writing, whether that's emails or memos or brainstorming or SOPs or anything like that. Obviously, being a marketer, I write marketing copy as well. And so I really like Claude for that. But there are a couple things about ChatGPT that I really love. In the fact that I can train it a little bit better. I can give it more information that it remembers about me, and I like that. Gemini is great, and it comes bundled with so many things. So they're all very similar. I often compare it, if you went down to it was time to buy a new minivan or a new car, and you went to the Chevy dealer, the Ford dealer, and the Dodge dealer, they're all going to have a product for you. And between the three of us, we'd probably pick 3 different vehicles. None of those would be bad vehicles. They'd just be different. And that's really how it is with the AI models right now. Any one of them will serve you super, super well.
So
I can't. I can't stop thinking. Like, is it Claude or like Claude? Like, is it a man?
CLAWD? Is that what you like? Wolverine?
Like
No, it's
Claude,
yeah,
or Claude, like a Frenchman named Claude.
yeah. It's like a Frenchman. It's CLAUDE.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm more familiar with ChatGPT than I am the others, just because that's what I kind of gravitated towards.
Sure.
Yeah.
We had Dr. Tyler Tarver on in our season 1, and he talked about prompt a day. If you really want to get into it, start doing a prompt a day where you can learn how to do things. And what are some suggestions you have in regards to, okay, I'm a teacher and I want to help it. I want ChatGPT to help me craft my lesson plans. What are some things that I might want to tell it, quote unquote, in order for me to teach the specific standards or teach the content that I'm going to be going over in class? Not that it can do the teaching, but how to organize it.
Yeah. No, great question. And I think the last thing you said is probably the most important there. AI is not going to replace the teacher. The teacher's still needed. We need the educator. We need them to help learn. But it can help with lesson plans. It could help with grading reports. It could help with reviewing essays and things like that. There's all kinds of things it can do. I think, as an educator, I'd probably start with my lesson plan and say, okay, here's my lesson plan. And I would use AI, ChatGPT most likely, as a colleague to brainstorm with, to plan with. And I would give it some basic information. So, my name's Jonathan and I teach at this school and I'm teaching this subject or this grade or whatever the case may be. I would upload my lesson plan if I had it in like a PDF format or a Google Doc or a Word or anything else. And I would share that with the GPT to let it know that, okay, whether again, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever, doesn't matter. But that way it has that information. And then I'd be like, okay, I've got a plan for next week. Let's take a look at week 1. I know as we record this, we're just in August. And so we're just about ready to kick things off. I know my son starts high school next week. Maybe I'm trying to plan those first couple days. And based on my lesson plan, let's, work with me, help me plan this so that we can put together a lesson plan that not only achieves my objectives, but also engages with the students and helps them learn and leverages my skill and experience to make this a great experience for everybody, the teacher and the students. And I just start having a conversation with it. And I think that's what a lot of people miss. They focus on prompts, and prompt just is how we communicate. I often tell people it's like texting. We text each other. You're texting AI and it's prompting. But when we text, we have a conversation. If we're trying to plan a lunch meeting, I don't just go once and say, hey, I'll see you today for lunch. We make sure we define what time and where and are you available and all kinds of other things. We have a conversation. And that's important to do that with AI as well.
Sorry, James, I thought you had something.
No, I'm thinking, Joe is, as we've defined before, much more of a tech enthusiast. I like to try, dip my toe in and give it a shot, but he's far more well-versed than I am. So I'm probably more of like what would be common to our audience of people who are really just not so sure and don't know how to start or where to start. So thinking about what you said and how different it is from the prompt today and what information to give to it. I also, as a teacher, with my students in the age that they are, they find, so if the school district computers block one version, they find another one and another one
yes.
and another one and another one. So that's the other part that I always approach this conversation with, how to get them to use it to their benefit rather than just to copy everything. Because it's so evident when they copy.
I was going to say, and I think, and I appreciate the struggle that educators are dealing with. I just, in fact, watched a video from my son's high school all about it. And, I appreciate it's a struggle. We don't want students cheating. We don't want them offloading that workload. At the same point, depending on where we're at in that process and maybe how old the students are, I'll tell you, as an employer, I'm far more interested in whether or not that student that's graduating knows how to use the tools than I am whether they remember the year that Columbus landed in America.
100%.
Not that that's not important.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, and I have to remember, it must have been 1492 because I remember it rhymes with blue. So that must have been when he landed, but.
Very good. You have 2 history teachers here. So we can
okay, well, see, I didn't know that. That was good.
Gold star for that one. So.
Well, I won't get a gold star for the next, which is, I'm not saying that's not relevant knowledge. But ultimately, if we're trying to educate our students so that they're capable of holding down great jobs that they get value out of and that add value to their lives and build great lives, part of that means they're going to do things they enjoy. And as an employer, again, I have never once, to the history teachers, asked somebody about a historical date that something happened for hiring purposes. We used to ask, do you know how to use Google? Not just, do you know how to type things in? But if I gave you a question, and literally we used to give applicants questions and go, we need you to go research this. You've got 5 minutes. What can you find out? Because we would learn a lot about applicants in whether or not they knew how to use things like Google to do research and to find information, and then hopefully use the skills they learned through their education to have discernment. And that's, I think, a big part of AI is having discernment to know what's relevant and what's not relevant. AI will make stuff up, and it does that because it's been trained on a vast array of data. Yeah, certainly as educators, you guys have seen books that have been written on both sides of a topic. AI has been trained on both, but nobody told it which one was true. So when you're asking it for information, it may not agree with what you want to say, or it may use a book that just wasn't accurate in the first place. And so discernment and that ability of both educators and students to be able to look and say, okay, this is a great research tool. It's a great tool to help me put my thoughts together. But should I use it to answer my quiz? No, I shouldn't. Not at all. At the same point, I appreciate the educators that are embracing AI and saying, we need to adjust what we're doing to include things like ChatGPT as a reality. Because as you were saying, as educators, you can stop them from using it at school, but I don't know. I think they all have these in their pockets. And if they're on their cell network, you're not stopping them from accessing anything. And the fact is that the moment they walk out of school, they're going to be using it. So I am encouraging educators, and I know this is hard for some, but I'm encouraging educators to embrace AI as a reality. It's here. It's not going away, despite what we want to believe. And unfortunately, the AI checkers that are out there, and if I offend anybody, I apologize, they're junk. They don't work. Everyone I've ever tried, and I spend a lot of time doing that, everyone I've ever tried takes documents like the US Constitution and says it's likely AI written because it was written in a style and manner that was proper English. So the AI checkers simply don't work. So now as educators, my encouragement is, how do we embrace this technology and help our students use it without having them use it to answer the questions and to cheat and that? And that may mean we need to change the way we're testing and some of the assignments that we're giving.
Yeah, and that's that. That of course is a larger conversation and a policy discussion for sure.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Of course, the testing drives. Unfortunately, the tail's wagging the dog, right? That the testing really drives the
No
instruction and
question.
the things that we're supposed to be doing in the classroom. How do you think that a teacher who has, for example, has to differentiate instruction and make different activities for a class of students that have varying academic ability levels? How do you think that ChatGPT, or how could ChatGPT or any of the AI models help that teacher differentiate instruction for students in the classroom?
I think probably the simplest way you can do so is that if we can identify students that have different skill sets or are at different spots, students like me that maybe have ADHD and those that don't, obviously that may require some differences there. Once we develop, let's say we'll go back to our lesson plan example. Once we've developed our lesson plan, we can then say, great, now how would we accommodate this lesson plan to address maybe the students that have dyslexia, or the students that have ADHD, or the students that maybe have another learning disability of some sort. And AI understands those neurodiverse issues very well and can then help the teacher very quickly update a lesson plan. Maybe it's a handout, or maybe it's an extra resource or something like that that can be made available to those students to help them with that lesson. And instead of the teacher now, because I know teachers don't have any more time. I mean, they're already overburdened. They're already, pushed to the limits. The last thing they need is, okay, now I need to figure out how to do this in 3 different ways. And I think AI can really help do that in a manner that is perfect. No, but it definitely helps them provide more value to those students that have other issues that they're struggling with.
Yeah, I didn't really think about it in the differentiating realm. It makes a lot of sense though.
Well, Jane, one of the things I was thinking about as I asked that question is the amount of, English language learner students that we have.
Yeah,
Like,
totally. Yeah.
like, and you're taking a training right now, that you started at the end of the last school year regarding, strategies for teaching and reaching, ELL students, which I think is great because our student population, of course, is in the particular school that we're in, is, they're highly integrated into many of the classes that we have. And it is a huge challenge to instruct those students when they don't speak the language.
Right.
I can only imagine.
So I don't know if like I thought of you, James, as I was asking that question. I was like, well, this
Mhm.
might be good for her to use
Yeah.
as she continue, because you obviously, dove in head first with learning about, different strategies that you could use to teach ELL students.
Yeah. So
Um,
I'm about halfway through this online course. I had started at the end of the year, and I decided to wait until August because if I do it in June, I can't remember in September.
I totally get that. Absolutely.
So
Yes.
yeah, so I did. So I'm about 50% through, and there are a ton of really great tips and direct instructional information that they're giving in the course. And so as you're going through this, I'm thinking I could use AI to take their suggestions and tailor it to this specific population. And that's the other part too, is that sometimes we might have 25 to 30 students in a class, and 2 of them are English language learners, and 3 of them
Mm,
have, who has an auditory processing disorder, who else has ADD, who else has, different needs. With 504s in New Jersey, the students are integrated into a gen ed classroom, and there is not a special education teacher. So,
mm.
I can have 28 kids, and, at least 15 of them might be, average learners, and the other
Sure.
12 have, and even of those 15 average learners, there's, a few here and there who are going to need different things too.
yeah. And even
Um,
within that
yeah,
ELL population, you might have one student that like only speaks Spanish, and another one that only speaks a
Sure.
Punjabi or some other language that they can't even communicate with each other and help each other. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So like
oh yeah,
sometimes, and I know Jamie, you've leveraged that in your classroom to have like, okay, you two, you might understand the English language a little bit better as a Spanish speaker than this Spanish speaker. Can you two help each other?
right.
But maybe it's taking that burden off of you. And how can we use any of these AI models to
I mean,
not
and quite
necessarily do
frankly,
that,
yeah,
but
but not even with me, with the kids, because
Hmm.
to circle back, Jonathan, what you said about, when kids were coming for job interviews, and having, how fast can you figure this out or solve this problem or find this information?
Right.
And and I'm a I will always pine for the libraries. Someone who always misses the actual print books, but the process of how you find information, the process of that is what really I miss more than anything else. So, that
Hmm.
whole idea of we're going to go to the library, but really what we're doing is we're figuring out how you take a broad topic and make it a narrow idea for yourself, how you continue through roadblocks when you look for something and you can't find it. And so the kids, what we're seeing now is if they can't find it, they just quit.
Sure.
And, or if they find something and they copy it, they're not able to read it and process what it actually says. What I'm noticing with my own children at home is really simple things I have assumed that they know how to do
oh yeah.
because
Mhm.
they are on a computer constantly. And something as simple as, where's the closest movie theater and what time is the movie you want to see showing? What, and it's like, what? What? And I'm like, that, right? And so I try to explain to them, like, we used to call on the telephone, and we would
Yes.
have
I
to
remember those
listen, right?
days.
You'd have to listen to the machine message. If you missed it, you had to call back and listen to the whole thing again. So they have that's just one example. They have all of these things at their fingertips, but they're not real good at figuring out how to find information, because if it doesn't come
Right.
up immediately, quit, done, no time, can't, gonna do something else. So I think
So true.
I would probably use it even with my own students, to say to them, like, hey, look, I know you don't speak the language that this child speaks, but let's use AI and translate this for them. Let's get to the root of it. Let's figure out what we can do with them. And the kids are always so willing to. There's always the kids, the helpers, that are so
Sure.
willing to do those things. And I think what a great opportunity for all of them, really, to be able to look at, oh, I can use AI for these types of problem solving situations that aren't just copying essays.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I think the translation is actually another area where it can really be used. If you're dealing with students and you may not speak their language, AI can get very, very close to creating your lesson plan in their language for them. So, you can take that lesson plan or the handout that was going to go to the students, or maybe it was just the notes that you need to somehow get to them, because if you write them on the blackboard, they're not going to be able to read them. You can now have those done in Spanish or in Senegalese or whatever language that may be in your classroom. And again, you're helping provide that student now with a better way to communicate. Is it perfect? No. But again, even by giving them access, they may have the ability to do that research and to communicate better with you by knowing that, okay, they need to convert what they're doing into English so that you can review that and read that. I work with a company out of Peru, actually, and I don't speak Spanish well. I didn't do well on that in school. But everything they do, as you can imagine, is in Spanish. And so oftentimes when I get an email from him, it's in Spanish, and I'll use ChatGPT or a tool like that to translate it. I'll then write my email back in English and have it translate and send back to him. And he knows I'm doing it. I've been very candid. That's how I'm doing it, because I'm not a great Spanish speaker. But it's allowed us to communicate very effectively and very efficiently. And it's not taking a tremendous amount of time in that process. It's not a frustrating process. It's now, there's just one simple additional step that I take. And again, it's proven to be very effective to allow us to communicate in a manner that we probably couldn't have done even 2 years ago.
And do you find that translation feature to be more accurate than, say, using, Google Translate or any other app on your phone or iPad?
We used to use Google Translate, and I found it worked really well. The problem was longer conversation. So if I was going to write a longer, for phrases, it worked very, very well. But if I was typing a longer conversation, it seemed to struggle. And versus, I could have that conversation very easily. In fact, I was just recently speaking down in Mexico at a conference, and again, I don't speak Spanish well, and so I needed some help at the hotel. And I used my phone. I pulled ChatGPT out and I instructed it. I said, I'm going to speak to you in English. I needed to translate and respond with what I've said in Spanish. And so I was literally there with the guest manager at the hotel, and they had broken English. And so it was very effective because I could speak it in and hold my phone up, and then it spoke in Spanish to them. And I don't know if the translation was perfect, but I got everything taken care of, and they were smiling about it and said thank you many times when we were done, because it seemed to make it easier on them. Even though they could speak some English, it was much easier for them to understand in their native language.
When we had, not to shift gears here, but when we had Dr. Tarver on, and we talked, it was kind of our first conversation about AI. He talked about teachers really having, and I do think this is a good idea, and I'm wondering your thoughts on it as well. Teachers having a policy in place in regards to AI and how it's going to be used in their classroom. So something, and what I'm seeing a lot of, and I do some tutoring outside of my school district, and a lot of the students that I have like an honor code, or
I love that
standard of conduct, right? And they have like, if you're going to use AI, it has to be with prior teacher approval.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm wondering your thoughts on that as an effective strategy to, like, for the teacher who might be a little bit apprehensive to, like, kind of dip their toe in the water to allow students to use it in their classroom. And again, we're going to be talking in our part 2 episode, little sneak peek, about, the elephant in the room, right? The how students can better leverage AI and how we can encourage them to do it in a ethical manner. But I'm wondering if that's, teachers having some kind of policy is a good way to go. And the part two on that would be, we also work in a district that is blocking ChatGPT for students on all district devices, as well as other AI models. How, like, what should that conversation look like if a teacher wants to say, hey, you know what, I really think we need to kind of open this up a little bit and allow students to be able to use these tools in the classroom? And what advice might you have for us if we wanted to kind of charge up the hill with the flag and fight that battle?
That was a 13-part question, which
I'm going to remember the best I can. Keep in mind, I have ADD.
So do I, as a matter of fact.
Well,
like,
let's start with the policy. I think that it is really important for the teachers to have a policy. I think that's critical because we need to communicate about it. I definitely got the impression last year during the school year that the general response was, we're not going to talk about AI other than that it's evil, and if you touch it, we're going to fail you. That was kind of the way it 100%. Seemed to come across.
Yep.
And all the kids did was find different versions that weren't blocked.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about my son, and you know, my son just used Poe instead, which wasn't blocked and gave him access to all the models. So that's, I guess, the second part I want to make is, while I think the policies are important, I think it's important that educators understand even the good kids are going to use AI, whether they're supposed to or not. Mm-hmm. Because everybody that's a student, and many of the parents, not all of them by any means, are looking, and bear with me, this is not going to be popular with your audience, but they're looking at the educators and going, you guys are clueless. We're using it. We're using it at work. We're using it here. To tell my kid that he can't use it is ridiculous. Now, to tell them that they can't use it in certain ways, that's probably okay and probably should happen, because I believe educators have an amazing opportunity to teach the students how to use AI responsibly. But that doesn't happen if we go, oh, no, you can't use it. It's evil. We have to get beyond that. And I know some educators are. I know some are not. And I know a lot of institutions are not beyond that. Even if the individual teachers are, I know a lot of the school districts and the people that are making those decisions are still in that, no, it's evil. And we've got to get beyond that, because total transparency, my son's school had a policy last year, you're not supposed to use AI. I told him, baloney, you absolutely use AI, just don't use it to write your paper. Don't use it to do this, but you absolutely should be using it. And his teacher asked me about it because, of course, I'm the AI guy. And I said, no, I told him to use it, period. Yeah. And they then said, well, but we've got these tools and it's going to find out whether he wrote stuff in AI. And I said, well, two things. One, the tools don't work. And if you read their terms of service, so I'm going to pick on ChatGPT 0 for a moment, which is one of the very popular ones in education. If you actually read the terms of service in ChatGPT 0 or 0GPT, I may get wrong, maybe it's 0GPT, it actually says you shouldn't punish a student or penalize them if the software says that their stuff was written with AI, because they're really not sure, they're guessing. Yet we have school districts that are basing their grading and their pass-fail on what this tool says. It's up to the school district. Obviously, I can't do anything other than vote. And I know my opinion is not necessarily popular. I get that. But I believe as educators, we need to accept the fact, trying to go back to your question, that students are going to be using AI. So instead of trying to stop them from doing it, because folks, this is not drugs. This is not like crack that is going to ruin their lives if they do it. This is a reality, and it's there. It's like telling our kids not to eat hot dogs. They may not be the best for us all the time, but what's the purpose at the end of the day? And probably a bad analogy.
I'm thinking like abstinence, as opposed to like safe sex education. People.
That's a great analogy. People obviously have.
You might as well give them the safe way to do it, because.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Again, we can talk till we're blue in the face, and the kids are going to do what they're going to do. Yeah. I think, again, as educators, the responsibility is to figure out, how do we help them use that responsibly? Yeah. And I really do believe that it's important to use AI responsibly. Even I do it as part of my business, but we talk about AI assistance, not necessarily, okay, I need to write a social media post, so I'm just going to give it to social media or to AI and let ChatGPT write it for me. No. In fact, if you ask the average business owner, would you let ChatGPT write you 30 days of social media and not check it? 99.9% of them are going to say, no way, I would never do that, which is what they should say.
And you brought up
sorry, go ahead.
You brought up something that I talked to my own students and my own children about. It's assistant, not replacement. We need to use these things as a way to assist. And look, as educators, if I'm teaching a 7th grade class and I get an essay from a kid that is the intricacies of the Industrial Revolution led to a blah, blah. Okay, you're using vocabulary that is way above your head in a sentence structure. Like, I know it wasn't written by you. You know it wasn't written by you. So we need to kind of come to some kind of impasse. Like, this isn't the ethical way to use these tools, number one. Number two, I think that one of the things that we've heard as a strategy is like, have the child talk about, or the student talk about, their paper or their writing verbally.
Yes, I think that's a great solution.
Hey, describe your paper to me. Tell me what you wrote about. And if they're like, then like,
yeah.
Well,
and I
want to
hit
in the
real quick
beginning of the year. It's harder in the beginning, but after a couple months, it's much easier. I think last year I tried to tap into the side of it, which was because I took to projecting it in front of the class and having us put in some different things because I wanted them to know that I knew what it was. And so I tried to use it from an social emotional point of view. So, like things like my friend is struggling with a breakup. She was dating a boy, he wasn't treating her very nicely. How can I help her through it? And and we would go through all of the different suggestions. You could try this, you could do this, you could do that. I wanted them to see it in real world ways of things that maybe they're not so sure how they can solve a problem or an issue, and how great it was for that, just in that respect. And I also just needed them to know that I knew what it was, because we're idiots. I
remember feeling that way about some of my teachers. Yes, I have a different perspective now.
And Jonathan, you said
teenager.
You have a high school age son. You don't know anything. Come on, we know.
I'm not going to know anything for I figure another 8 years in his life. I have a 17-year-old male child. That means that dad is clueless at least until he's 25. Yeah. So then miraculously my brain will start growing and I'll make some sense again. But until then, it's just the reality. Right. You mentioned something though about knowing how it was written, and you're absolutely right. Sometimes that's the case, but the other thing I want educators to be aware of is that most people that are using AI regularly, and that may or may not be the educators again if they're not embracing it, know how to train it to sound like them. So, for example, if you told me to write an essay for my history class, I'm pretty sure I could write one that you couldn't read and tell was written by AI, and I could use AI to write the entire thing simply because of how I instructed it to write, the education level, the tone, the style, all those types of things that I could do. And I'm not trying to challenge anybody. That's not the point. But I want educators to realize that it's really easy to pick up if somebody just goes to ChatGPT and says, yes, write me a report, an essay for my history class on World War II and the Bismarck. Okay, you're going to pick that up really easily. But if that student has used it at all, or their parents have used it all, and they're going to learn how to write at a specific education level and a specific tone and a style. And it's going to make it much more difficult. So I actually love the idea of having somebody explain it, because that's also important in the workplace. So going back to my role as an employer, it's really important that the student, when they graduate, have the ability to vocalize and verbalize what they've learned. Because a lot of that communication today, whether it's on Zoom or whether it's being done in person, has to be done that way. So I think that's a great solution. And like you said, it's going to be really apparent very quickly. If that student doesn't know the topic, it's going to become painfully obvious within probably less than 30 seconds.
What do you think would be a good way? I mean, we know we've talked about like how to make sure that students are using it ethically and appropriately, but let's final one-part question, not a single part, not an 8,000 part question.
That's all right.
Some ways that teachers could creatively incorporate ChatGPT or any AI model into like a student project. Like, okay, you want them to create something, you want whatever it may be, and not like, just the run of the mill, use Canva and have them make the flyer for you, whatever it is. But like, how could they leverage ChatGPT for creativity in the student workspace?
I would encourage them to use it as part of a planning. In other words, let's, and I'm not an educator, so if this doesn't resonate, I apologize. But let's say we're talking history, and again, my son's very much into World War II, and for some reason, a lot of the battleships that were there. So I hear about some of those that come up. And let's say that we were part of what we were doing is we were writing some essays about the battleships used in World War II. I would encourage that educator at that point to say, let's use AI to help put together an outline of what a report should include. Let's use it to help us brainstorm and plan what this project should be in order to achieve the objectives that the student decides. But let the student decide, am I going to talk positively about ships in World War II? Am I going to talk negatively about them? Am I going to talk about their strengths and how they changed from World War I? Or am I going to talk about how they're antiquated based on what we have available today? And let the student pick some of that and let the AI help plan that. But again, then as part of the presentation, even if there's some stuff that's written, make sure that, again, there's a verbal part to that, or there's another part to that that isn't just purely AI driven, that has more to it than that. So I think, again, as educators, the best thing that can happen is we can teach our students how to use AI as a tool that helps them save time, hopefully amplify their skill and experience, and as students to learn things as well. Because we do that. When I have a new employee start, a lot of times they need to learn about the things that we do as a company. And one of the things we often do is we give them prompts to go to ChatGPT with and ask questions. And those prompts are like, I'm brand new at Whitebeard Strategies and I need to learn about email marketing, which is one of the things that we may talk about. I need a 101 class to help me understand what email marketing is, how it works, and why it's important. And guess what? We can get that customized then to that person, and it can be done in literally minutes. Now they have to read it, because otherwise they're not going to get it. And that's probably the other part I'd end is have them use AI to do some of the research. They can use a tool. You may not have heard of Perplexity, but Perplexity is another engine that's very popular. It's an AI-based search engine. The neat thing about Perplexity is it doesn't rely on its own knowledge. It actually goes out like Google and looks at the internet, and then it pulls data in and it summarizes that data using AI. Would be a great way for them to learn about a topic instead of necessarily giving them all the details. Find some ancillary or some niche areas of a topic and challenge the students to go home and use tools like Google, Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT, and Perplexity to learn about that, and then come back tomorrow and give us a 1-minute overview of what you learned. Now they're going to be using those tools in a way that'll help them learn something. And you, as the educator, here's the good news. You didn't have to go ahead and take hours to prepare this, to teach it to them. All you had to do is come up with the topic, and then you need to take 10 minutes and do your own research on it to make sure that whatever they did is accurate.
Right. Claude, Gemini, Perplexity.
She's writing them down.
That's good.
What's the other one? Claude, Gemini, Perplexity.
So ChatGPT is the big gorilla we all talk about. Then there's Claude, Claude. Then there's Gemini from Google. And then Perplexity is similar but different in by that it's really an AI-based search engine. But I find it's a great research tool because, again, ChatGPT's knowledge cutoff, which can be an issue, is August of last year. It's a year old as far as its knowledge right now. Claude's knowledge cutoff, it was sometime this spring, and I don't know about Gemini, but I believe it was early 2024.
Wow.
That means if, let's say we're talking about politics and history, we want to talk about the current election, ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini are going to know nothing about the candidates that are running for election right now unless it happened prior to their knowledge cutoff. If I go to Perplexity, though, I can find out what happened at the DNC convention last night.
Wow. My head's exploding. No, and again, this is of course part one of our conversation about AI. And I really appreciate your perspective as someone who, I always caution calling people experts. I know you're very well versed on the subject of AI, but I really think you are an advocate for all things AI and how we can better leverage it, whether it be from a marketing perspective or in the classroom. So if we can encourage the members of our audience that are listening to really if you're going to make a goal for yourself for this year, for this school year, to try and dive in, and really dip your toe in the water as to how you can better leverage these tools for planning in your classroom. We also have some other guests in season 2 on the teacher side of things that are going to talk about some tools that they use in the classroom. That'll be upcoming in future episodes. But we wanted to, and Jonathan, we want to thank you for joining us for part 1 of our discussion on AI. And we hope that our audience will join us for part 2, which will be coming up next week as part of our season 2 slate of guests. So as always, hey, Jamie, I appreciate you.
Joseph, Jonathan, I appreciate both of you.
This is our thing.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see everybody on part 2 of our AI discussion coming up next week. We'll see you then.
Bye.
The Balancing Act podcast will now be available weekly. Check out Apple Podcasts or Spotify and give us a follow. We appreciate you.